Hi guys, it's me Chazza HD and welcome to a review of qualifying for the 2019 Bahrain Grand Prix, where of course in today's video or stream we are going to look at everything that happened, all of the team's performances, how they got on, and just what made them end up in the position that they did end up in. Hopefully you guys are doing well after the qualifying session. Hopefully you have calmed down a bit after of course the qualifying watch along. By the way, if you have not checked out that watch along, in the description down below, you can go and watch back the, replay of qualifying from our end. Yeah, qualifying was pretty good. I enjoyed it. We had some newer faces and some newer positions, let's say, and I thought it was a pretty good qualifying session, and we'll get into it in just a moment. Just want to say, though, hopefully you guys, no matter where you're watching in the world, are doing very well on what is, for me, a Saturday evening. So, let's now get into what happened in qualifying. And of course, I'm going to start off with the results. And if you don't know what the results are of qualifying, then let me now show you. So, for the first time in his career, Charles Leclerc has took pole position from Sebastian Vettel in second, Lewis Hamilton third, Bottas fourth, Verstappen fifth, Magnussen in sixth, Carlos Sainz P7, Grosjean has qualified in eighth but has a penalty. I'll get into that later on in the stream. Raikkonen is ninth, and then Lando Norris is in P10. And then your bottom 10 is Daniel Ricciardo in P11, disappointing again for Renault. Albon 12th, Gasly very disappointing in P13, and then Perez, Kvyat, Giovinazzi, Hulkenberg, Stroll, Russell and Kubica. Of course, the two Williamses at the very back as usual. But now we have dealt with the results. Now let's get into what happened team by team in qualifying today. And of course, we are going to start with the world champions Mercedes, who, when it came down to it, at the end of qualifying, they were a lot closer than people expected them to be. 0.3 of a second, that's about where I thought they would be if they did not get pole, which I expected. I did not see them getting pole position or getting the front row. But for Lewis Hamilton, and this kind of goes the same for Valtteri Bottas, I'm slightly disappointed in their final qualifying efforts, because I felt as though they could have done a better lap at the end, because Sebastian Vettel was there for the taking. He was not that far ahead of Lewis Hamilton, for example, and also Bottas. So I think they could have had a better position in qualifying, and I think Lewis Hamilton could have finished in P2, but of course he did not, and this is what he had to say after qualifying had finished. He said, "Charles did an incredible job today. Tomorrow, though, is the more important day, and we will give Ferrari a good fight." And it is telling that he does say that, because I think he is expecting his car to be a lot better in the race than it was in qualifying, and I also expect that from this team. But again, I feel as though Hamilton could have done better to get ahead of Vettel. I think he could have got ahead of Vettel, but he did not. But pace-wise, let's be honest, it's not a surprise that Mercedes have ended up on the second row of the grid in P3 and P4. We saw this coming for the entire weekend, really. Ferrari have had the pace. So no surprise they've ended up on the second row. But they're still looking, I think, quite good. Now let's go on to Valtteri Bottas, who for the first time here in Bahrain has been out-qualified by a teammate of his. But again, like Hamilton, I wouldn't say he did a bad job in qualifying or anything like that, but I think he could have done better in his final attempt in Q3. Vettel again was there for the taking, but they didn't take that opportunity. I don't think they really pulled out, say, the lap they needed to to upset the odds and get a front row start for the Bahrain Grand Prix. So I think there was more pace in the Mercedes car at the very end of qualifying. But for Mercedes in qualifying, I don't think they were bad. I mean, if you look at them compared to Red Bull, they were way faster than Red Bull. I don't think they have a bad car. Their car just doesn't suit this track, and also the Ferrari is better at this track, I think. So it's not a surprise that they've ended up on the second row. But in the race, they definitely can win the Grand Prix. There is no doubt about that. But they do need certain things to go for them. For example, they need to try and either split the two Ferraris at the end of the first lap or get into the lead at the end of the first lap. They cannot let Ferrari have a 1-2 at the end of the first lap, because if that does happen, then I think Ferrari will win the Grand Prix, because I think with a 1-2 they'll have enough speed to beat the Mercedes drivers. But if they can get a driver either in P2 or into the lead at the first corner, then their chances are a lot better than they would be if Ferrari have a 1-2 at the end of the first lap. So the start for Mercedes is so important. If they want to win, they have to gain positions at the start. They have to gain positions at the start if they want to win, because if they end up P3 and P4 at the end of the first lap, I don't think Mercedes will win the Grand Prix. But we'll see, of course, tomorrow in the Bahrain Grand Prix. But now let's move on to the Scuderia and Ferrari and Charles Leclerc, who has took, of course, his first ever pole position in his young career at 21 years old. I am also 21 years old, so it does show for me just how unbelievable it is for a driver to get pole at such a young age in his racing career as well. But pole position for Ferrari in only his second race for Ferrari, absolutely unbelievable. And he does fully deserve it, because he has been better than Vettel this weekend. He was faster than Vettel in practice 1, practice 3, Q1, Q2 and Q3. The only session where Vettel was better was practice 2 yesterday on Friday afternoon. So Charles has been the better driver this weekend so far, and I think is fully deserving of the pole position. Of course, Ferrari, no real surprise about their pole position or really the front row start that they have got. But still, nice to see that Ferrari, their performance in Australia was only a one-off, because I was slightly worried that they would come to Bahrain and not be that good. But they've shown the speed that they had in testing that I saw personally for myself at testing. They have now showed that they do have, around this type of track, or more say a normal track compared to Albert Park, the best car in Formula 1. It's still very close though, of course, at the top, but I think Ferrari definitely around Bahrain have the best car. I don't think anyone can really doubt that. They've had a 1-2 in every single session since practice 1 got underway Friday morning. So definitely Ferrari have had the pace. And this is what Charles had to say at the end of qualifying. He says, "I am extremely happy, of course. Seb is an amazing driver. The driver that, of course, he beat to pole position and has beaten this weekend plenty of times. But today I am very happy to be on pole, and he has every right to, of course." But these are the key stats behind Charles Leclerc's first ever pole position. Again, it is his first ever pole. He is also Ferrari's youngest ever pole sitter in their history, and is the second youngest driver ever to take pole position. The youngest driver ever to take pole is, of course, Sebastian Vettel in his Red Bull days. I think Vettel's record youngest driver pole was Monza 2008. So you know, very, very long time ago, 11 years ago, shows you how long it has been since Sebastian Vettel came on the scene. But yeah, a very, very great day for Charles Leclerc. Can he convert that into a race win? He should do. He has the car to win the race. The Ferrari race pace-wise isn't going to be absolutely amazing, but it should be good enough to win the Grand Prix. It's all down to whether he gets the start right and how his pace evolves during the race. So it's all down to him, really. The car is there. He just needs to do the best, or get the best out of himself, of course. But moving on now to Sebastian Vettel, who you could argue was disappointing today, but I thought today did well enough. He was expected, of course, to be in the top 2 positions because he is very good at this track, and also the Ferrari is the best car in Bahrain, so it's no real surprise that Sebastian Vettel is on the front row. But I think with his lockup in his first run in Q2, compromised himself massively in having a run at pole position, because he could only do one run in Q3 because he didn't have enough tyres left to do 2 runs in Q3. So maybe he could have had a better chance at pole, but to be honest, I don't think he would have got pole. I don't think he has had the absolute outright speed this weekend over Charles Leclerc to get pole position. Leclerc, for me, has been consistently faster. Vettel has made more mistakes this weekend and hasn't looked as solid as Leclerc has during this weekend. So for me, second place is about right and about where he really should be based on what has happened this weekend. And this is what Sebastian had to say after his performance today in qualifying. He says, maybe I was a bit shy in the second sector, but I think Charles did a very good job today and he deserves to be on pole. Absolutely. The main thing is that we got the job done. This weekend the car felt a lot better. And well, this Ferrari car has come on night and day since Australia. It's pretty clear they had very, very bad setup issues and cooling issues at the Australian Grand Prix. They have now been fixed, and the order we thought Ferrari would be in, they are now in. So looking very good for Ferrari, and they are the favourites to win the race tomorrow. It's not going to be easy for Ferrari. If you think Ferrari are going to cruise to a 1-2 finish, don't think that, because Mercedes, especially at the start of the race and around the pit stops, are going to give them a very tough time. So they're not going to be able to just sit out front with a 1-2 and cruise to the finish. They're going to have to fight for it, because I think especially Lewis Hamilton is, in a similar way to Monza in 2018, is going to, when he gets the opportunity, he will try and get past a Ferrari driver when he does get an opportunity, especially at the start. So Ferrari have got to execute perfectly the start, get away 1-2. Doesn't really matter what order, as long as they're 1-2 at the end of the first lap, then I think Ferrari will most likely win the Grand Prix. I don't see them losing it if they have a 1-2 at the end of the first lap, going, forward for the rest of the race. I think if they have a 1-2 at the end of the first lap, they are most likely going to win the race. So that is vital for Ferrari tomorrow. But now, let's move on to Red Bull. Now, I don't want to start with Max Verstappen, because, I mean, he didn't do a bad job, in qualifying, but he didn't really grab the headlines as much as Pierre Gasly did. Pierre Gasly, of course, ended up in P13. Now, you may think, something's obviously gone wrong with the power unit, or maybe the strategy from Red Bull was wrong like it was in Australia, which is why he ended up in P17. No, that is not it. Gasly finished P13 because he deserved to finish P13, because this weekend he has been very, very poor. He's never at any real points in the weekend. I think in practice 1, he was in P6, but practice 1 and practice 3 is irrelevant because of the, the different conditions, massively different conditions that they're held in compared to qualifying and the Grand Prix. He was P6 in that session, but after that, he's never really looked like a front runner. He's looked like someone who is going to be in the midfield and has never looked confident in that car this weekend. And again, deserves to be in that position. It's really a terrible, terrible performance by Pierre Gasly. Now, I will say, I think people are jumping to conclusion way too quickly. I don't think we should be debating whether Gasly should be dropped way too early. If he's still doing this by Monaco, then yeah, drop him, because he's definitely not getting the best out of that car. But, with the way it works at Red Bull, if you don't get your act together quick enough, they're going to be looking for other drivers. And it's not like there's no drivers out there to replace him. Albon, Kvyat are there, who are very quick and competitive. Not as competitive or quick as Max Verstappen, of course, but you see my point. But yeah, Gasly has to step it up. Even if he finishes in the points tomorrow, that's not really going to make up for the absolute shocking pace he has had this weekend. He's expected to finish in the points. At Red Bull, I wouldn't say you're expected to finish on the podium at, say, every Grand Prix or normally, but with the car they have, you're expected to be in the top 5 on the grid or in the race pretty much every weekend, at the very least. Now, I know Gasly had his issues with qualifying in Australia, but in the race, he wasn't decisive enough when he needed to be and finished outside the points, and he didn't deserve to finish in the points, in my opinion. And for the race tomorrow, I'm not certain he will finish in the points, to be honest, because, look who he has ahead of him. Daniel Ricciardo, Kimi Raikkonen, is it Romain Grosjean? Yeah, Romain Grosjean is ahead of him on the grid. I'm just remembering. He does have a penalty, by the way, a 3-place grid penalty, which I'll get onto later. Romain Grosjean, Kevin Magnussen, who, by the way, the same Kevin Magnussen who was 5 thousandths of a second slower than Max Verstappen, and Gasly could not get anywhere near Verstappen this weekend. He's been consistently half a second slower at best. It's going to be tough for him to score points, and then you've got people behind him like Perez, who normally in the race are pretty good and can manage their tyres well and get a very good result. Don't think for a second Pierre Gasly is just going to waltz into the points and run away from the rest of the midfield. He won't. I doubt he'll be able to beat Ricciardo and Raikkonen in the race unless they make mistakes or have their own issues. If he does score points, it's going to be a 9th or a 10th. It's not going to be a strong points finish considering where he's starting. I don't see Pierre Gasly having a good result in the race tomorrow. He doesn't have the speed. And if he is going to finish in a strong points position, he's really going to have to do very, very well with what he has, because there are drivers ahead who will not give him an easy time. Absolutely not. So he has a tough race tomorrow, and he has to improve after this weekend, because even if he finishes in the points, P6 or P7, it's still not going to be a good weekend for Pierre Gasly. So what he has to do is, for Shanghai, qualify in the 3rd row and then try and be competitive for a podium. But if this happens again in Shanghai, then questions, I think, need to start being asked whether Pierre Gasly is really good enough. But in terms of being absolutely deserving of being dropped, let's wait till Monaco. But in terms of asking that question, let's see what happens in Shanghai in 2 weeks, where I think Red Bull will be a lot more competitive, as Shanghai is a lot more aerodynamically efficient of a track than Bahrain or Baku, which is the next track after Shanghai. So let's see what he does there. But poor for Pierre Gasly. And for Max Verstappen, he did the best he could. I think he did very well to beat Magnussen, to be honest, because K-Mag in the Haas was very, very, very quick. Only 5 thousandths of a second slower in a Haas, which you do not expect. So I think Max did the best he could. P5 realistically was the best he could do in today's session. But for the race tomorrow, as he said on Twitter after the session ended, they'll be looking to get the soft tyre off, get on the mediums, and try and maybe get a podium. The Red Bull will be a lot more competitive in the race. The race pace of the Red Bull, as we know, is always a lot better. Also, hold on a minute. Sorry about my throat there. Very sore, of course, after the watch along earlier. We know Red Bull on race day are always a lot better. And also Bahrain, it's a lot easier than Australia to overtake. So if Max Verstappen gets a sniff, of course, we know he's going to try and take that opportunity. So it's possible for Max to get a podium. And I think as a dark horse for a podium, I wouldn't be shocked if he got a podium. Wouldn't be at all. Because we have seen the Red Bull be miles off in qualifying. Like, look at Brazil last year. Red Bull, I think, were a second off pole position. Or maybe 8 or 9 tenths off pole position. And then in the race, you saw what happened. He passed Raikkonen, Vettel, Bottas, Hamilton, and deserved to win that race, by the way, if it wasn't for Esteban Ocon's stupidness. So it's not out of the question that he could get a podium or maybe even more than that. So don't deny or doubt Max Verstappen for a second, because with that car on race day, you never know. But yeah, Red Bull with Verstappen, they did the best they could, but Pierre Gasly, I have to say it again, absolutely terrible. And he has to step it up for Shanghai. And as I said again, you know, even if he finishes in the points tomorrow, that's not going to make this weekend a good weekend. The only thing that would make this weekend a good weekend, from what he did in the race, is if he finishes on the podium. And there is no chance of that happening. So, yeah, Gasly has had and will go down as having a terrible weekend. But before I get onto the midfield, guys, I just want to hear from you guys in the live chat and the comment section to see what you guys think of the top 3 teams and their performances in qualifying. For Mercedes, do you think they could have got second place if one of their drivers, as Vettel was a bit slower than maybe expected at the end of qualifying? For Ferrari, what did you think of their, say, return to form? And for Red Bull, what do you think of Pierre Gasly? I know you guys will have plenty to say about Pierre Gasly, but with Max Verstappen, do you think he can be a contender for a podium tomorrow? I think he absolutely is, and I think anyone doubting that possibility is a bit stupid, to be honest. You'd be very stupid to doubt Max Verstappen and Red Bull and their ability to get a podium tomorrow. But yeah, let me know right now in the comments and the live chat, and I'll try to read out as many comments as I can for the next 5 minutes or so. But also, I just want to let you guys know that don't forget to subscribe for more content regarding the 2019 Bahrain Grand Prix that is coming. Tomorrow, 10 past 3 or 3:10 p.m. UK time, I will be live for the race watch along. So don't forget to subscribe for that. Bottom right of the screen, you can click subscribe right there. Or click on my channel name, go to my channel page and subscribe and hit the notifications bell for that content that is coming tomorrow. But I'll now read out some comments for the next 5 minutes, and then I will move on to the midfield teams. There's plenty to talk about with the midfield, which is good. We definitely want to see that. But yeah, let's now read through the chat. Eric, nice to see him here, says, I think as far as Red Bull, they definitely would have been better with a Renault engine this year. As far as qualify, I disagree. I don't think Red Bull would be better at this point in time with the Renault. I think what they have right now is good enough. I don't think they, would be better with the Renault. Put it this way, and Nib actually said this plenty of times. Red Bull with a Renault power unit would not have got a podium in Australia. Absolutely no way would they have got a podium. So, yeah. And what he asks, what does he say? Red Bull, they definitely have been better, would have been better with the Renault engine this year as far as qualifying, or do you think the McLaren chassis is just that good? The Renault power unit has improved, but it's still, I think, the worst power unit at the moment. It's very close, don't get me wrong, it is very close. There might be a race like Baku where it proves that Renault do have a better power unit, but, let's wait and see. But I think the McLaren chassis is just a lot better than it was last year. McLaren looked to be about a second faster in the pecking order than they were this time last year. And of course, at the Bahrain Grand Prix in 2018, they finished P7 and P8 in the race. So, you never know. They could end up with a similar result or a better result in the race tomorrow. But with Red Bull, I don't think they would have been any better off with a Renault for today's qualifying. I think the McLaren chassis has just come forward so much in a year and even 6 months. So I think it's more to do with the chassis than it is the power. Francisco asks, Chaz, a 2-stop or 1-stop for tomorrow? It will be a 1-stop race. I don't see anyone doing a 2-stop unless you have enough of a gap behind to go for a fastest lap, or enough of a gap behind to pit for an extra time to maybe get a position that you won't get if you're staying on the current tyre you're currently on. So most likely, normally, it's going to be a 1-stop. Either soft to hard or medium to hard. That's the strategies that are going to play out tomorrow. Right, let me read some more comments. Stella says Gasly needs more time to adapt and he will be near Max for sure. Hopefully he improves. I mean, if he improves, then, that's a good thing, of course. He can only improve from here, surely. It can't get any worse than what he's done today. Even though position-wise he's had a better qualifying than he had in Australia, today was a worse day for Pierre Gasly because he deserved to finish in P13. In Australia, he would not have finished in P17 on pure pace. He was a lot faster in Australia than he was or has been in Bahrain so far. Right, let me find some more comments. And hello to Eric in the chat. Right, let me just find some more comments regarding the teams here. Rugara says, overall Red Bull was more frustrating and disappointing than straight up bad. I'd say frustrating. I wouldn't say disappointing, because I think Verstappen did the best he could and got the position that he was likely to get. I think Gasly was disappointing, but I don't think the team was disappointing. I think the team was maybe frustrating at times, because plenty of times during the weekend they made errors. But yeah, I wouldn't say disappointing. A bit frustrating at times because they haven't had the cleanest weekend. Have Red Bull. Sebastian says, I feel a crash happening at the start. Vettel will not let Hamilton by, and Max will challenge Bottas and Hamilton. I think Vettel will challenge Leclerc into the first corner. Well, as I made reference to earlier, with Lewis Hamilton, he will try to do a Monza 2018 style race to try and capitalise and get past the two Ferraris. And of course, at that race, there was collisions on the first lap, so it's possible, but you never know. To be honest, in Formula 1, when you predict a crash happening, it tends not to happen. And then when you think that the start's going to go swimmingly, then you have, 2 or 3 massive crashes. So I wouldn't expect a crash at the start if you're wanting one, of course. But if you don't want one, then maybe expect one because, yeah, as I said, it tends to kind of work the other way than that. Ben McCarthy, he asks, why did Max and Seb only have one run in Q3? Did they not have enough tyres after using 2 sets in Q2? Yeah, Seb did not have enough tyres left, and Max, I don't know why. They were working on his car for some reason, so it might have been a slight issue with the car, but I know with Vettel it was lack of tyres. It might have been the same for Verstappen, I don't know. Isaac says Vettel will be definitely desperate to overtake Leclerc at turn 1 because he doesn't want to be embarrassed by his teammate. Hopefully in his desperation he does not destroy his, Leclerc's and the team's race, because we've seen that plenty of times when Vettel gets desperate, points are lost, not gained. Right, I'll read out final comment and then I'll move on to the midfield. Again, plenty to talk about in the midfield. And the final comment is, I'm going to go with Simon Craglin's comment because it is interesting. He says, I feel like Vettel has lost a little bit of his edge in qualifying. For example, Mexico, USA, Brazil, Monza, Silverstone. Yeah, I think he has a bit. I don't think maybe as much as you think. I think some of it is Lewis Hamilton illustrating his superiority in qualifying speed. But for example, Brazil last year, he should have got pole. The Ferrari car, I think, was a better car. In Interlagos. Today, he had a very scruffy qualifying. Where else? Mexico, he probably in Mexico should have beat Hamilton to P3. USA also, yeah. He is a bit, he's not as clinical as he was. But I think that's maybe because, I don't know, the situation is Red Bull days. Maybe it suited him better, that era. I don't know, but I see your point and I do agree with it. I think he is not as clinical with his pole positions, but that also has something to do with Lewis Hamilton illustrating in a equal enough car his superiority in qualifying speed. So it's kind of a bit of both. But there you go, But now let's move on to the midfield. And we're going to start off with Renault. Very nice picture there of the Renault. But for this team, qualifying was absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. Now, Australia, of course, P11 and P12 on the grid, and then they finished P7 in the race with Nico Hülkenberg. But you would have expected Renault to maybe show some sort of improvement from Australia. I personally did not expect them to be that quick here, but I thought they would still be very competitive with McLaren, Alfa Romeo, you know, those type of teams. But this weekend, the drivers have said it, and it's become clear in qualifying, that car is just not quick enough. And, well, right now, I'm not quite sure what the issues are. Of course, they do lack straight line speed compared to teams like Haas and Alfa Romeo. But look at McLaren. Same power unit, and McLaren were 0.6 of a second faster. That's Carlos Sainz in the fastest McLaren to the fastest Renault. So you can't really talk about straight line speed because McLaren have the same power unit. They're not the works team. And they're destroying the works team so far this weekend. So it's not that. It has to be grip of the car. Now, I'm not going to absolutely say what the exact issue with the Renault car is at the moment, because I think after the Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai, we will know a lot more about the strengths and the weaknesses of really all the cars. But with the Renault, definitely, we will know a lot more about where it's good and where it's not so good. Because Shanghai is, again, the most aerodynamically efficient track we go to before the European season starts. So if they don't do well there, if they do even worse there, then we know that they have a good enough power unit in relativity to the midfield. But But in terms of the chassis and the aero, it just isn't anywhere near as good as it should be for that team with the budget they have, so on and so forth. So we'll have to wait, I think, till the next race to really see where the issues are. But they just don't have the speed. They don't have it at all. Qualifying this year compared to last year, again, like Melbourne, it was worse this year than it was last year. In Bahrain in 2018, they qualified in P8 and P10 on the grid. And then, of course, today, P11 and P17. So obviously something is going wrong. And I'm starting to lean more towards aerodynamics and chassis because, you know, it's become pretty clear that Renault have made some pretty, not massive, but some good gains on the power unit. So it must be to do with the aerodynamics. But I don't think we'll know that for absolute sure again until Shanghai. But it seems as though the grip of this car just isn't that special or that good. And I said during testing when I was there, this car doesn't look bad, but it just doesn't look like it has as much raw grip as, say, a Haas or an Alfa Romeo or at times a Toro Rosso. And to me in testing, it looked faster than the McLaren aerodynamically. It looked about 2 to 3 tenths of a second faster than McLaren. But now they're 0.6 of a second behind. So something has gone wrong. Maybe they've had some bad upgrades on the car. Maybe they need to take something off and put something new on. I don't know. But definitely the grip of this Renault is not right and it has to be improved. Because, you know, this year has to be the year where they really take a hold of that midfield and run away with fourth in the Constructors. Renault today should have been beating Max Verstappen on the grid. Kevin Magnussen, 5 thousandths of a second off in the Haas. Renault should be beating Haas. I know Haas are at a track where, you know, the track suits them. They have good straight line speed, better straight line speed than the Renault. But Renault are so much bigger than Haas and have much more history and a lot more behind them than Haas. They should be beating Haas, and they should have been lining up in this Grand Prix for me ahead of Max Verstappen with, say, Daniel Ricciardo and then Hülkenberg in, I don't know, P6 or 7 or 8. Renault should be in that type of position. P11 and P17 is nowhere near good enough, and they absolutely have to improve going forward. Maybe Shanghai, they can bring an upgrade because it has been plenty of time since the first race. I don't know. For this team, I think the areas where they are struggling is aerodynamic and chassis, to be honest. And I do actually, just remembering, I do have a quote from Ricciardo in regards to today's session. This is what he had to say. Qualifying wasn't perfect for us by any means, but it's an improvement from where we've been this weekend. In the end, we are closer to Q3 than we expected at the end of Friday. To me, with Renault, internally, it seems as though they understand and know why they weren't good at the first race in Albert Park, pace-wise, where they should have been. And then they've come to this race expecting to be better. Now you're at a normal track and all of that. They seem to have been a bit shocked by the lack of speed that they do have. So I think Renault are a bit shocked as to how slow they actually are. So they need to quit being shocked and get working on a better car, because if they don't finish P4 in the Constructors this season has been an absolute disaster, and Cyril Abiteboul should be sacked if they don't finish P4 in the Constructors. And if things continue this way, I don't see how they could finish P4 in the Constructors. I don't see how they could finish in the top 5 in the Constructors unless their car improves massively. So they've got to start making improvements right now, and start coming up with upgrades or planning upgrades to improve areas of the car where they are clearly weak. But we'll now move on to McLaren, who I don't think are quite back. They're a lot more improved compared to this time last year, but it is nice to see McLaren doing a lot better. That's their first Q3 appearance at Bahrain since the 2014 Bahrain Grand Prix, and that was the last time McLaren were really competitive, say at the front of the midfield, was 2014. So they seem as though they are, I'm going to be careful what I say, but they seem as though they've come out of the bad times and are starting to make some progress, at the moment at least. We'll have to see, of course, how they progress during 2019, but right now, McLaren at this track seem as though, to me, they have probably the 5th fastest car this weekend. And that is something McLaren have not had for a long, long time. The 5th fastest car at a race weekend. They're looking very good on McLaren. Sainz did very, very well in P7. And Norris did well. Could have done better than P10. I think he would have been a bit disappointed that he was not maybe a couple positions higher. But P10... good enough, I think. We'll be starting P9 because of Grosjean's penalty. But a good day for McLaren, and things are looking a lot better. And I will say that chassis looks miles ahead of where it was this time last year and also at the end of last year. They look like they are making some good progress now. Hopefully, they don't get ahead of themselves and they slowly but surely make progress as the season goes on. Next up is Alfa Romeo, who, with Kimi Raikkonen, I think Kimi did well. P9 on the grid, just like in Albert Park. I think that's a good position. And as long as he finishes... if he finishes 9th or higher, I think that would be a good result for Alfa Romeo. I don't think they're expecting to be amazing at this track, but I think 9th or higher would be a good result for Kimi Raikkonen in the Grand Prix, and I think he did pretty well considering the issues that Alfa Romeo had yesterday and have had this weekend with time on the track and issues happening with the car. But again, Antonio Giovinazzi in P16. Now you could say, oh, maybe he was unlucky in this area. He wasn't. He has been consistently down in that area for the entire weekend, and also finished 1 second off Kimi Raikkonen's best qualifying time. That is nowhere near good enough. You can be, 2 or 3 tenths. Sometimes, that happens. The other driver likes this track more, but 1 second is not tolerable for me. And I know in Australia in the Grand Prix he had damage, and I think did well enough with what he had in the race, even though he wouldn't have scored points anyway with the car he had, or with the pace he had before the damage that weekend. He hasn't done anything positive, I think, this year. He's been at the Australian Grand Prix, he was slow the entire weekend. Yes, again, he had the damage in the race, but he was not going to finish in the points anyway. He never had the speed to. And this weekend, again, hasn't had the speed at all, and has ended up where he deserved to end up, P16 on the grid. So, for me also, like Gasly, just not performing well enough compared to where they should be. Giovinazzi should be around where Ricciardo and Albon were on the grid today. P11, P12 at this track. That's where he should be at least. But 1 second off, that you cannot tolerate that as a team boss from one of your drivers. Again, if you're quarter of a second or third of a second off, you can say, well, this driver loves this track, so that's why there's a gap. But 1 second is not a tolerable gap. So for me, Giovinazzi, also like Pierre Gasly, has to step it up, because that will earn him the sack if he continues that type of performance. But for Alfa, I'm not going to say good, but a satisfying qualifying, I think. I think Kimi did the best he could with what he had. We'll be starting the Grand Prix P8 tomorrow because of Grosjean's penalty. If he finishes in that position, that would be a very good result. I think for Alfa Romeo, I think that'd be a very good result. So hopefully he can get that and get another good points finish for the Swiss or Swiss-Italian team. They are still technically Sauber, but there you go. Next up is Haas. Now, I'll start off with K-Mag before I get ranting about Romain Grosjean's penalty. K-Mag was the best driver for me out of the midfield. To be that competitive in that Haas, I know the Haas is probably the best car in the midfield this weekend, but to be that competitive is such a great result. And to be 5 thousandths of a second off Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, a Red Bull car that has way more grip than the Haas. That is a great, great effort. And for me, K-Mag, again, just like this time last year, proving why he deserves, well, definitely to be on the grid, but deserves to be in a front-running midfield team. You guys probably would have thought I was going to say front-running team. No, I'm saying front-running midfield team. He absolutely deserves to be where he is, at the front of the midfield, because he is performing just like he should. But for Romain Grosjean, qualified 8th, which is a bit surprising because normally Grosjean goes well at this track, and I don't know why he was slower than Magnussen like he was, but there you go. Qualified P8, slightly disappointing. Honestly, I think he could have out-qualified Carlos Sainz, to be honest. But he has got a penalty for blocking Lando Norris in Q1. Now, I want to make this clear, and this may be confusing, but I'll explain what I mean. With the blocking he did on Norris, he did block him. There's no doubt about that. But for me, unless what you've done is dangerous, if you have not affected the other guy's grid position, which Grosjean has not done, you should not be given a penalty. So I don't get why Grosjean has been given a penalty. Yes, it is blocking. You can clearly see that, but it did not affect Lando Norris's grid position. Norris got through quite comfortably in the end into Q2, and then of course into Q3. I don't see why there was a need for a penalty. It should have been no further action as far as I'm concerned. Didn't affect his grid position. And yeah, I don't really understand that verdict. I can understand them punishing someone for blocking when it has affected their ending position, but it didn't affect Norris's qualifying at all. He didn't, suffer damage or, end up getting knocked out of Q1 or Q2. He got through fine. So why is there the need for the penalty? That does not make any sense to me, but there you go. If you disagree, let me know in the comments or the live chat. But for Haas, a good qualifying session, very good qualifying session. And tomorrow, the aim for them should be a double points finish for sure. Magnussen, if he can, finish again in P6 like he did in Australia. And then for Grosjean, what he needs to do is probably finish where he qualified. If he can do that, and then Magnussen finishes in 6th. So if Haas finish where they qualified, that would be a very, very good result for them as they continue to pull away from McLaren, Renault, Alfa Romeo. So if they can get the same result that they got in qualifying in the race, that would be absolutely brilliant. And I'm hoping that they do. I'm really pulling for them because I want to see them continue this progress they're making as a team and not drop back like I thought they would for 2019. So hopefully they do continue that. So if they finish in the positions they qualified in, then that's looking great for this team. But now let's move on to Toro Rosso. Again, just like Australia, when it came to qualifying, they disappointed. Albon P12, Kvyat P15. Danny Kvyat, I don't know what it is, but all weekend, just like in Australia, all weekend leading up to qualifying, looking good, looking quick, and then in qualifying, nothing. I don't know why that is the case, but he isn't getting it right when it comes to qualifying. Maybe he is lacking the consistency that we know he can lack sometimes. I don't know if that is the case, but yeah, I think Kvyat needs to really sharpen up on the qualifying end, because I think in the race tomorrow he'll probably be very quick and maybe contend for a point. But if he can get qualifying right and show the speed that we know he does have, then maybe Toro Rosso could finish in the top 10 in qualifying, but of course they did not. Alexander Albon, P12, good position. He will not be starting any higher because of Grosjean's penalty, because he's too far back to receive that helping hand. But P12 on the grid, if he can maintain that sort of position, if not gain at the start of the race, and then there's retirements ahead, no reason why he can't finish in the points. So looking good for Albon. And again, I think Albon proving that he is a better driver than people give him credit for, and is not one of the worst drivers on the grid. There is absolutely no way Alexander Albon is one of the worst on the grid. I mean, he's out-qualified Pierre Gasly in a Red Bull, and he's in the Toro Rosso. You know, there's no, as the Twitter meme goes, no correlation. So, Alexander Albon, good qualifying. Kvyat should have been better, and I think he does have to improve his qualifying speed. But I think going into the race, Toro Rosso are quietly confident of a points finish, and they should be contending for points, if not nicking a point. Moving on though to Racing Point, who have the worst car in the midfield. They don't have the worst car on the grid. That of course goes to Williams, but the worst car in the midfield is the Racing Point car. They haven't had the speed all weekend. The car doesn't look very stable, doesn't look like it has that good a turn in or exit in the corners. It just doesn't look that good of a car, and it looks a bit worse than it was at Melbourne. So yeah, Racing Point to me look as though they have the worst car in the midfield. They do have a chance of points tomorrow, but it's a bit less than, say, a team like Toro Rosso, because I think Toro Rosso have a bit more grip than Racing Point do, and will have more opportunities come to them than Racing Point. But yeah, the cars just never looked good at this track. I thought it would look good, honestly. I thought Racing Point would be in a Toro Rosso position, you know, not looking too bad, could nick a point in the Grand Prix, but I don't think Racing Point can. I don't think they have quite the car. It's not impossible, but I don't think they quite have enough of a car to do so. Hopefully, though, I am proven wrong. And of course, Williams are at the back, 19th and 20th. They're going to finish in the last two positions in the race if they do finish the race. One thing that is nice to see, though, Robert Kubica was only half a tenth off Russell. So for anyone out there thinking, oh, Kubica is not competitive enough, don't think that, because he was very competitive with Russell, and I think did just as well as Russell did today. So yeah, he did the best he could. The drivers, you know, they're doing the best they can, but what can you do when you're driving basically a caravan round a track, racing proper racing cars? But yeah, that is the midfield. And as I come to the end of the stream, guys, let me know what you thought of the midfield, and who is looking good for tomorrow, who's not looking good, who is maybe a dark horse for a point. Let me know in the comment section and also the live chat. I'll try to read out as many comments as I can before the end of the stream. The stream, not the scream. But before I end or get into the live chat, don't forget to subscribe for tomorrow's race watch along, 3:10 p.m. or 10 past 3 p.m. UK time. That's the race watch along time for the 2019 Bahrain Grand Prix. So don't forget to subscribe, bottom right of the screen, or click on my channel name, go to my channel page and subscribe. And also hit the notifications bell for that content as well. But hold on, let me just clear my throat a minute. And now, let's get into reading some final comments from you guys for the final 5 minutes. Let's now read what you guys have to say. Crystal Racing says, Toro Rosso is such a hard team to read because they never do any development during the year. Aerodynamically, yeah, I agree. The only reason they got better last year was because the Honda got better last year. It wasn't because the car aerodynamically was getting better. But yeah, they're going to have another one of those seasons where start off all right, have a dip, maybe peak at Singapore, Mexico, but they're not going to do nothing special. They never really do. 2008, of course, they did, but normally Toro Rosso are just you know, a nick a point here, nick a point there type of team. They're not massively competitive, and I don't think they're really set up to be competitive, to be honest. Crystal Racing says, in regards to the Grosjean penalty, but watch the replay. Grosjean slowed too much and nearly caused Norris to crash into him, and nearly then spun with a tank slapper on the start-finish straight. I disagree. Norris had plenty of time to see he was there. He knew he was coming up on a slower car. It's not like Grosjean, it's not like Monaco where you turn a corner and immediately there's a car there going slowly. He had time to see there were cars ahead, and especially with Romain Grosjean. So I don't think Norris was ever at risk of crashing into him. I think Norris probably had it kind of in his mind, oh, I might have to slow down here. This guy doesn't look like he knows where I am. Yeah, he could have spun, but I just disagree with the penalty because it didn't affect his position, and I don't think it was a dangerous move. He definitely blocked him, but it wasn't a dangerous move, and it didn't affect his qualifying position. So for me, no penalty. Should have been just a warning. But of course, it's Romain Grosjean, so he must be punished. Let me find some more comments here. Crystal Racing says Giovinazzi was beaten by Kimi by just less than 0.1 of a second into 15th for Q1, although that might have been Kimi doing a poor lap, as Kimi said on the radio. Kimi, well, he did do a poor lap because he didn't improve his final time in Q1, so it was a poor lap by Kimi Raikkonen. I think he went like 3 or 4 tenths of a second slower than his time, did Raikkonen, so that doesn't bail Giovinazzi out. He doesn't... Giovinazzi just hasn't at all done anything positive for me this season so far. Couple people saying Kimi is outperforming the car. I don't think he is. I don't think he is. I think what he is getting out of the car is about what is in the car. I think, though, in qualifying terms, we know Kimi Raikkonen can be a bit off the pace in qualifying. If you had a faster driver alongside him, like a Carlos Sainz or a Kevin Magnussen, Alfa Romeo could have been higher on the grid in Australia and also in Bahrain today. And that's why, if you're going to have a strong season as a team, especially in the midfield, you need 2 strong drivers. That's what Haas have, that's what Renault have, that's what McLaren seem to have so far. That's what you need. You can't have one driver who's doing the best he can and then one driver miles behind where he should be. So Alfa are going to have to maybe find out how to improve Antonio's performance, or just, I don't know, give him a bit of a, I don't know, a hug. I don't know, something that improves his performance, because they can't have him down in that position when they need the points. They really do need the points. Simon Cragland asks, do you think Magnussen is better than Kvyat and Sainz? I think he's better than Kvyat, but I don't know about Sainz. They are pretty equal. You know what, I'm going to say it. Based on what I've seen from their careers, I think Kevin Magnussen's better than Carlos Sainz and Danny Kvyat. You have to remember, Magnussen got a podium in a midfield car in 2014 in his first ever race. Carlos, of course, has had plenty of good races, but he has never had a performance as good as that. That entire weekend from K-Mag was fantastic. K-Mag for me is more decisive with his overtaking, with his qualifying speed. He can really be a demon when it comes to qualifying. Carlos, is not as consistent when it comes to that area. When Carlos is on it, he's great, but when he's not, he can be quite mystifying. For K-Mag, kind of the same at times, but I think K-Mag is a bit more quicker, and I think is a bit more decisive of a driver than Carlos is. So I'd say he's better than Sainz, better than Kvyat, and you know what? I'm going to say it. I think Kevin Magnussen is better than Hülkenberg, honestly. You have to say he's better than Grosjean at the moment from what we've seen 2018 and 2019 so far, even though Grosjean was good in Australia. Who else have we got in the midfield? Raikkonen. I think Kimi is better for sure than K-Mag, but I think qualifying wise, I think K-Mag is probably a faster qualifying driver, but I think Kimi is a lot better in the races. Perez, I'm not too sure about Perez. I rate Perez, as you guys all know, very highly. I don't know about that one. It's kind of a close one. I'd probably say Perez is better than K-Mag, but it is quite close. But K-Mag is a very good driver, and for me, criminally underrated. Simon Cragland says demand, or what did you say? I said demon in terms of you know, being a speed demon when it comes to qualifying. Simon Cragland says better than Hülkenberg. Really? Why? For me, he's better than Hülkenberg because when he gets an opportunity for a position, he goes for it, and most of the time he makes it work. He has a podium. You can't say that, you know, Hülkenberg's had more opportunities at podiums than K-Mag has had. K-Mag had his opportunity and took it at the 2014 Australian Grand Prix. I think K-Mag is a faster driver than Hülkenberg. Maybe not as consistent, but he's not far off being that consistent. K-Mag has improved his consistency. But yeah, I think he's faster, more decisive of a driver, a bit more aggressive when you need to be, and I just think disappoints me less than Hülkenberg does. Right. Let me find a couple more comments and then I'll end the stream. But thank you for asking me that question, Simon. That was a very good one in regards to K-Mag, because I think K-Mag doesn't get talked about enough. He's a very good driver. Very good driver. People need to rate the guy more highly. I'm going to say it now. I think he is one of the top 10 best drivers on the grid. You've got what? In no order, you know, Hamilton, Vettel, Leclerc, Verstappen, Bottas. I think Bottas is better than Magnussen. Honestly, I think Bottas is better. I think Bottas has the speed and he's more consistent than both, you know, Magnussen, Hülkenberg. Ricciardo, I think, is better than Bottas. So the top 6 on the grid for me would be what? Hamilton, Vettel, Leclerc, Verstappen, Ricciardo, Bottas. And then for me, after that, I'd say Perez. Well, not Perez, Raikkonen. Then Perez. Then K-Mag. And then after that, I don't really know. Probably either Hülkenberg or maybe Grosjean, but I'm leaning more towards Nico Hülkenberg. But yeah, K-Mag for me is in the top 10 best drivers on the grid. I honestly think that. I don't think Gasly, by the way, is in the top 10 on the grid. I don't think Gasly has proven that he is actually that good as of yet. Let me find a final comment. And by the way, for the people saying in the chat with Bottas and Ricciardo, I don't think Bottas is better than Ricciardo. There's absolutely no way. I think Bottas is probably better than Raikkonen when he's actually on it. But Raikkonen can be a bit more consistent at times and provide a better end result. Diego Design says, I just got here. What are your thoughts on the Alpha for the race tomorrow? Kimi starts in P8 and Giovinazzi P16. Giovinazzi will just float around in the midfield and will not score a point. if Kimi finishes where he is starting the race, which is P8, that would be a very good result, and I think Alpha should aim for that result, P8. That'd be a good points haul, I think, from this race for that team. Right. Now I'm going to find a final comment to end on from you guys. Let me just find one. I'm just looking now to see what you guys have been saying in the chat. We were talking about the penalty of Grosjean. Crystal Racing asking Magnussen to replace Vettel for 2021. It'd be amazing if that did happen, but realistically, no. I don't think they would do that. Unless K-Mag did something incredible, like win a wet race or finish on the podium in a dry race and be genuinely that quick. He'd have to do something like that, very special, to get a seat at a top team. If he does what he keeps doing now and finishes, you know, P5, P6, getting the best out of the Haas that he can, that's great. But if he got a podium or even better than that, then that would probably put him in that stratosphere. The final comment that I'll end on is from Jago Design, who asks, how long do you think Gasly will last at Red Bull if he continues like this? If he continues like this, he will be dropped after the Monaco Grand Prix, and he should be dropped after the Monaco Grand Prix. That's how long personally I would give him to improve his performances. He has to improve a lot. He has to be closer to Max, and has to be, when it comes to qualifying, he has to be getting to the third row of the grid at the very least. Yes, the Red Bull car was not very fast today, but he should have been a lot better today, no doubt about it. But if this continues race after race until Monaco, and including Monaco, I think he should be dropped for Albon or Kvyat. I think he should be, because you cannot have a driver in the second car that is, well, pathetic. If you want an example of a driver that was like that in a top team, go back to 1993 and look at Michael Andretti in the McLaren Ford alongside Ayrton Senna. Senna was brilliant in 93. That was probably Senna's best ever season, 1993, because he was pulling out performances from left, right, and centre in a car that was 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds slower than the Williams, and sometimes he was actually faster than the Williams in certain races, whilst Michael Andretti, even though he was a lot closer, I think, to the car's performance, he was terrible. He was absolutely terrible. And eventually they dropped him for Mika Hakkinen in 1993, but I think they waited way too long that season to drop him. But if he does something similar to that, where he continues to disappoint and disappoint and disappoint and disappoint until Monaco, and including Monaco, then at Monaco, or after Monaco rather, he should be dropped and put back in the Toro Rosso, and then put whoever's done better in the Toro Rosso into that car in the first 6 races. But let's not, you know, get serious into that talk, because, you know, Gasly might win the next race. We don't know. The Red Bull is going to make progress as the season goes on, and Gasly should improve as the season goes on, so hopefully he does. But there you go. But guys, that is the end of today's 2019 Bahrain Grand Prix qualifying review. Thank you guys for coming along and being a part of the stream as always, and talking about, you know, all the performances and stuff like that. But guys, remember, 3:10 PM UK time, that is when I'm going live for the race watch along, and I'll be live from then, which is an hour before the race starts, until about 6:40 or 6:45 PM UK time. So make sure to join me at 3:10 PM UK time for the race watch along, of course, for the 2019 Bahrain Grand Prix. And we are set for a good one, I know that, especially with the battle in the midfield. But don't forget to subscribe for that content coming up tomorrow. Bottom right of the screen, you can click subscribe right there, or click on my channel name, go to my channel page, and subscribe and hit the notifications bell for more content like this. And also, like this video, comment down below what you thought of this video, and also comment down below what did you think of the performances of the teams and drivers today, and who do you expect to be good or not so good in tomorrow's Grand Prix. Let me know in the comments as well. Don't forget to join the Discord server. That is the best place for notifications for my videos. We have a very nice growing community over there of about 135 people now in the Discord. It is very nicely growing, and it's nice to see that. So thank you for anyone who has joined. And if you do want to join, the link is right there below you to join the hardcore Shazza HD F1 community. And again, the best place for notifications for my videos. And also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Chaz6110. That's a great place to keep up to date with me and the channel and what's going on. And if there is any issues as to why I'm not doing a video or a stream, then you will see on Twitter. And check out my website chazahd.com for more content like this. But guys, until the race watch along tomorrow at 3 PM UK time or 3:10 PM UK time, it has been me, Shazza HD. Goodbye.